Setting the record straight on Elections Canada, that is the topic of tonight's Byline. Did you hear about Elections Canada investigators busting down Ken Dryden's door with the help of the RCMP yesterday? Neither did I, and chances are it will never happen, even though Dryden and 3 other former Liberal leadership candidates are now in violation of the Elections Act. Dryden, Joe Volpe, Hedy Fry, and Martha Hall Findlay have all failed to pay back campaign debts from the 2006 Liberal leadership race, despite more than 5.5 years of fundraising and 2 extensions. The campaign debt should have been paid off by the middle of 2008. Back then, several other Liberals, including then leader Stéphane Dion, plus Gerard Kennedy and others, still had debts to pay. Rather than apply the law with an even hand, though, Elections Canada offered an extension rather than prosecution. Now, compare that to their treatment of Conservatives. In April 2008, Canada's non-partisan elections watchdog raided Conservative Party headquarters as part of a criminal investigation. The Conservatives took a different interpretation of how advertising could be bought and paid for during a campaign. They'd already taken Elections Canada to court to try and get a definitive ruling on the matter. Now, rather than letting the court system play out, Elections Canada launched a criminal prosecution, a parallel criminal prosecution, and they raided Conservative HQ with the help of the RCMP. Then there was the kid glove treatment that they gave to the NDP over a donation scam. In the wake of Jack Layton's death and the NDP asking for donations for the Broadbent Institute, a left-wing think tank that was still being set up by a number of people associated with the party, well, Elections Canada kind of looked the other way. The party was actually promising a 75% charitable tax credit to anyone who gave, even though the Institute still wasn't set up and didn't have charitable status. The NDP was essentially renting out their charity number in violation of the law. Their punishment? Nothing. They simply had to stop giving out tax receipts and offer refunds to people who felt duped. Do you think that would work? Say I robbed a bank or I collected money through false investments and just said, but I'll give it back. Would that be okay, or would I face prosecution? Elections Canada has a spotty record on enforcement, one that runs along partisan lines. In 2011, they turned a blind eye to clearly partisan third-party activity by the alleged charity known as Environmental Defence. The group, fronted by Rick Smith, took issue with statements from Environment Minister Peter Kent. Smith promised to run ads, make phone calls, and knock on doors. In all, he promised to contact 50,000 homes in Kent's riding of Thornhill. Now, despite what was clearly partisan work aimed at unseating a candidate, Environmental Defence never registered as a third party as required by law. The result? Shrug of the shoulders from Elections Canada. No big deal. Now, in 2008, a group out of New York City called Avaz ran ads targeting several Conservative candidates. They wanted them replaced with NDP, Liberal, or Green MPs. The ads ran in Halifax newspapers but were claimed as expenses for BC ridings. That's just one of the irregularities. Now, the American group had a tax filing that gave to U.S. authorities that claimed to have spent $137,000 on Canadian political activity. But when they filed to Elections Canada, they claimed just $57,000 in spending. A complaint was launched. Nothing was done. Elections Canada, in one of their documents released through Access to Information, said Elections Canada does not and cannot monitor day-to-day advertising expenses incurred during an election campaign. Well, I wonder why. They seem to be able to monitor Conservative election spending. They seem to be able to prosecute Conservatives over their advertising. There's no reason Elections Canada couldn't monitor this sort of spending. The organization has been building a mini-empire for some time now. Consider this. In 2000-2001 fiscal year, the program expenses for Elections Canada, that being their non-elections expenses, well, they were just $4.7 million. 5 years later, the figure jumped to $18.1 million. And in 2010-2011 fiscal year, the non-election expenses were $30 million. That's quite a jump. Expenses going up sixfold in the space of 10 years. You have to wonder what they're spending their money on. Elections Canada could monitor the spending of Avaz. They could monitor Environmental Defence. They could prosecute the NDP and Liberals, but they won't because they're a hack organization with a clear political bent. It's time to clear house over there. If Chief Electoral Officer Mark Mayrand isn't going to be fired and replaced, he should do the honourable thing and resign. And that's the byline. Joining me now with more on this is our own Mark Dunn, who's been following the story of the wayward former Liberal leadership candidates. Mark, you've been checking out what Elections Canada is going to do on this, and end of story, they don't have a clue, do they?
No, they don't. I mean, the rules are quite clear. I mean, this thing all got punted back to Elections Canada last week in a ruling by the Ontario Superior Court. The judge was quite clear. Three of the candidates, Joe Volpe, Martha Hall-Finley, and Hedy Fry, were in breach of the Elections Canada Act. Penalties are quite clear. $1,000 fine, 3 months in jail. So we've been trying to press Elections Canada to find out, well, what are you doing? They're saying that we can't make any decisions till we review this ruling. Well, it's an uncomplicated 2.5-page ruling.
Hold on. How long is the ruling?
2.5 pages.
2.5 pages. Does it use big words or small words?
I think any sort of first-year law student or actually high school student would have no problem deciphering the ruling. It's pretty clear because the ruling's basically about enough's enough. You people have had enough extensions. It's quite clear that in the last 2 years you really raised no money at all. You're not really making a great effort, any huge attempt at raising money. So punted it back to Elections Canada. But the bigger question to me, Brian, is like when you ask Elections Canada, so even hypothetically, if you were to impose, let's say the $1,000 fine, for instance, which is set out as a course of action under the Act, what would happen to the money that these people, would it absolve them? Would that penalty absolve them from ever having to pay back the money? And that's the issue, of course, I wrote about, appeared in a lot of the papers today, and those are these kind of answers we're trying to get from Elections Canada, but they can't even answer that simple question. It's like we're reviewing it, Mark. We'll get back to you with a more fulsome response when we actually understand what our own law says.
Okay, so today's Friday. This happened more than a week ago now.
The ruling was last week. It was posted Tuesday this week on the Superior Court.
And they've been
website.
facing media questions since Tuesday, and they still don't have an answer. Mark Mayrand is a guy that likes to say, we've got to apply the law as the law is written. And when I broke the story about Elections Canada allowing women to vote with full veils over their face, he said, well, the law is clear. And the law is not clear, but it was clear in what his interpretation was. Now the law is clear. $1,000 fine or 3 months in jail. I want Hedy Fry in jail. He's not going to do it, though, is he? They're just kind of hedging their bets.
Yeah, I mean, I think they're hedging their bets. And there's also some legislation, the Political Loans Accountability Act weaving its way through Parliament, too. And you wonder if they're trying to, play off that a little bit, because that would actually help the Liberals kickstart their fundraising, some of these candidates, because you got to remember, people have to understand that during a leadership contest, donors are allowed to contribute once. That's it, not per annum, solely once.
So these changes would allow them to contribute once per year.
Once per year.
That still wouldn't help Ken Dryden solve his $360,000 debt problem.
No, he would have to have, one huge Montreal Canadian reunion with a lot of past fans there to pay that one. And plus, a lot of these people, Martha Hall-Finley is no longer a member of Parliament. Joe Volpe is not a member of Parliament. Ken Dryden is not a member of Parliament. So it makes it even harder, to sort of shake up that support you had way back in 2006 to come forward again and contribute another, whatever the maximum is, $1,200. So very difficult. It's a story that we're going to continue to pursue in the coming days and weeks. And Elections Canada has some answering to do, because, they can't just keep sticking their hand in the hat and pulling out, who should we look at today? Because it always seems to be, oh, Conservatives, let's do that one. Other one, we'll put that one on the side. Because it does, there's an appearance that there is a bit of an imbalance in which political party or which MP they go after without, showing the goods or meting out the punishments that are set out under the Elections Canada Act.
Well, that's definitely the feeling we're getting. Mark Dunn, thanks so much.